Hello from Las Vegas, dear Motorsport-Magazin friends and Formula One fans. I actually wanted to get married, but as you can see, the door is already locked. Unfortunately, it was no longer possible, maybe tomorrow. This wedding chapel is actually in the middle of the paddock here at the Las Vegas Grand Prix. Right next to it, in typical Las Vegas fashion, there is of course a small casino. This is Las Vegas. Whether you like it or not, opinions are naturally divided. We had a spectacular start to the weekend. Yesterday, the day before the media day, there were already the first events. Mercedes with a spectacular event with drones and cars in the desert. Red Bull spectacularly launched a special livery, which we know by now. They are actually not that spectacular. Today was the big opening ceremony, with many well-known artists and of course all 20 Formula One drivers. But I said, you either like it or you don't. One person who doesn't like it at all is the world champion Max Verstappen. If you go to Red Bull's Instagram channel, there's a quote from him that quotes him like this: "It's great to be here in Las Vegas for the penultimate race." That's a PR quote, so you can see the difference between PR and real media work. Because Max Verstappen told us something completely different today. He said he didn't like it at all, 99% show, 1% sport, and he really felt like a clown at the opening ceremony. I have to say quite clearly that he was exaggerating, because the opening ceremony was 30 minutes long, 28 minutes of which were spent with musicians on stage. For 2 minutes the drivers waved once into the crowd and that was it. Yes, they had to meet a bit beforehand in the garage and so on, but that had nothing to do with a clown. I think it's appropriate for the fans that the drivers are there. But still, of course, there really is a lot around it, and Max Verstappen is not a fan of it. On the other hand, you could say that he's also a big beneficiary of the whole thing, because he earns a lot of money from Formula One, and the more popular the whole thing becomes, we all know why it's so popular, the more money he earns. He says no, it has nothing to do with each other, so he wouldn't give up money if he didn't have to come here. But Max Verstappen is of course not the only critic here. We've already taken a closer look at the racetrack in a separate video, what we like and what we don't like about it. The drivers said that when they looked at the layout for the first time, it wasn't that exciting, but when they drove it in the simulator, they realized that it was much more technical than they had originally thought. And nevertheless, it's obviously not a really spectacular track for the drivers, but of course it passes all the landmarks and it should make for good racing. There are also different opinions. Sure, long straights, especially the long straight of course, 1.8 kilometers on the strip. But they have installed Monza wings because the track is so fast. At the same time, that means little slipstream and very little DRS effect. George Russell has calculated that the wing only adds 1/10 of a second on the long straight. The DRS zone is also extremely short, but let's wait and see whether or not we will see the good racing that we are promised. The biggest criticism so far, however, is actually the schedule, as qualifying takes place at midnight. The race is at 10 p.m. on the same day. That's also a bit difficult to get your head around. But of course that means for us, that's when the whole thing starts. Then the session lasts an hour, qualifying if it goes well, and then the real work begins for us journalists, for example, for many in the teams too, of course, getting the car ready again and so on. Drivers also have appointments, briefings and so on. So it goes well into the night. Media sessions go on until 3 o'clock, and then we still have to write the stories. It sounds like we're just moaning, but you come to the USA, there's a 9-hour time difference to Central Europe, and then you have this weird schedule. You fly west, but you actually have the schedule or lifestyle of Suzuka in the east. So it's really extremely strange. Then there's this jet lag, and if you look around the paddock, most people are walking around like zombies because no one can really get their internal clocks right. We all look a bit like people sitting in a casino, pressing buttons all night and gambling away their money. I'm curious to see if that will still be the case next year. The next race back-to-back is Abu Dhabi, a 12-hour time difference. Then there's the fact that we have a different schedule again. So to deal with that, yes, I know it sounds a bit like complaining on a high level, if you're allowed to be here. We're already used to bad working hours, but this really tops everything, and I'm curious to see if they'll do the same thing next year. The reason why they do it this way is, of course, because this way the actual track time is as short as possible. The traffic actually runs over it, and this is the time when traffic is least obstructed. That's a big problem here in Las Vegas, and there was a lot of criticism in advance from local residents who didn't think it was great that Formula One was being held here. Overall, there is a lot of criticism in the run-up, not only from the drivers towards the track and the show, but also from the fans. Ticket prices are extremely high, many tickets have not been sold, hotel prices are going down. So it's a bit like the big Las Vegas hype that Formula One would definitely have liked, which has partly materialized but partly not. Another very interesting point is the sphere, the city's new landmark, this huge LED sphere. It looks spectacular, the track goes around it, but it's a problem for Formula One. It's on private land, which means you have to rent it. There are no events. You two had to make room, and the light signals could of course be problematic for the Formula One drivers. If something big, yellow or red comes up, they might think it's a red flag or a yellow flag. That's why Formula One had to rent the entire area, i.e. the LEDs themselves. Of course, this has the positive side effect that you can then also show your own sponsors, which Formula One obviously didn't want anyone to advertise on this LED sphere that they don't want. That's why it costs a lot of money, of course, but there are already spectacular pictures. The sphere, I saw it yesterday in its normal state. It's really spectacular because Formula One will also show some timing information, driver helmets and driver profiles. So it will be spectacular. It will be pretty cool. Feel free to write in the comments what you think of this Grand Prix. I'd say it's a bit of an anti-Monaco. On a single lap, the track probably isn't that exciting, but it's supposed to be good for racing, plus all the showy stuff around it, not really historical like in Monaco, but all newfangled, like the whole city, all artificial. I think you just have to like it. In sporting terms, however, it could actually be very exciting here, more exciting than many races earlier in the season, because you really have to have Ferrari on your radar. Carlos Sainz said it's a mixture of Singapore and Monza, and we remember Singapore was the only non-Red Bull win this season thanks to the many slow corners. In Monza, the Ferrari was also really good. They were on pole position there. Ferrari is always a force to be reckoned with on fast tracks. And then there's another very interesting fact. You can see that I'm standing here in my jacket. It's not 5 degrees as some people expected, but it's still cold, and that means the tires are cooling down. There will hardly be any surface overheating here, and that's obviously good news for the cars, which actually have problems with tire degradation, and that's where Ferrari comes into play again. So it's possibly the second big chance for Ferrari to do something against Red Bull here, which would of course add something extra to the whole thing here in Las Vegas. If we look to the right, you can also see the team logos there in a beautiful neon light look, also typical of Las Vegas. It is not necessarily a spectacular paddock, a lot of large space that is not used, also poor lighting, but a really impressive pit building that Liberty Media has built itself in this short time, it has to be said, unbelievable. Unfortunately, our media center is on the other side, a 10-minute walk away. Then we have Haas here, so there's a lot to report again. Among other things, Günther Steiner against the FIA, we've heard that before. Something has happened since the last race. There was this right of review that was shot down by the stewards. Günther Steiner and the stewards are not particularly good friends. He once said amateur stewards. Now he has quoted the stewards and said that the stewards have told the FIA that they are not doing a proper job. Of course, he is clearly referring to the monitoring of track limits, which cannot be the job of the Aston Martin and Haas teams, who have denounced the whole thing. That's why Günther Steiner went into the next round against the FIA. And another very interesting point is why they chose right of review instead of a protest, so they don't have to pay a fee, which makes it much cheaper for Haas. Then there's the matter of Nico Hülkenberg, who is going back to the old specification. He wasn't at all happy with the new specification over the last 3 races. Kevin Magnussen, who has a completely different feeling in the car, is sticking with the new one. So I'm curious to see which variant will prevail here. Of course, it doesn't necessarily speak in favor of the development step that Haas has taken, but Günther Steiner also said that they didn't expect such a huge step anyway. That's why this is not a huge mega negative surprise. And then there may also be a very exciting clash here at the weekend. General Motors has now announced that it wants to build its own power unit for Andretti in 2028. Formula One has not reacted to this at all. They preferred to focus on Netflix and golf, but not on this news that a huge automotive group wants to build its own power unit. Not just a marketing exercise, not just a sticker, but something real. The General Motors bosses will be here on the race weekend, and I'm looking forward to it. Stefano Domenicali, the Formula One boss, certainly can't just slam the office door in their faces. I hope that Formula One has a little understanding, because no matter how you feel about the whole issue, if a car manufacturer really wants to join Formula One with this level of commitment, then it's almost impossible to say no. 2028 is still a long time away. You can't wait that long. Christmas is almost here again, and we have the perfect present. Motorsport Magazine print subscriptions you can give as a present for someone. It's easy, the link is below in the video description, and now we've had enough of all the show stuff. Now we're looking forward to cars on this racetrack.